This is the Mookse and the Gripes podcast. Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a really good summer. This is Trevor. In short, Paul. Paul, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Yeah, I'm enjoying this summer. It's been pretty hot, a little hotter than I would care for, but other than that, we've been getting some good rain, so,
It's supposed to be over 100 this week here in Utah.
Yeah, I do love summer, but I feel like it's right on that turning point where, the first, June and some of that is, everything's growing and green and nice, and then right around now, not quite, but in a week or two, I feel like it starts to turn where it's just okay.
When is fall?
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of how I am too.
Dry, yeah. But yeah, no, it's going pretty well so far.
I have a similar thing with winter, as we've kind of talked about, where it gets to that point where it's just kind of cold and hard to go outside. And I've tried, and I figured out some ways to start enjoying that time more.
Yeah.
Things that are particular to that time that I can do. And I'm trying to do the same thing with these summer months where it starts to get just where I think, okay, when's school start again? When is fall coming? I want to start being able to put on sweaters,
Exactly. I know. One of those summer things that I've mentioned before that I continue to kind of rely on is just we have a nice hammock in our backyard with some nice shade trees, and I definitely try to get out there and read whenever I can. So that's definitely, the summer evenings especially, that's nice. But there are those times in the day where it's just, you're ready for something different. So But yeah.
Well, I wanted to start today, just give people a little bit of a roadmap of a few things that are going to come up in this episode. We are going to be talking about authors that we don't connect with, but we've got some ways of doing so that it's not just authors we don't like. In fact, it's authors that we'd kind of like to like. We feel like we should like them. But we'll talk about that in just a second. We do have the winners of our New Directions giveaway to draw and announce. And
winners,
share some
plural.
Winners, plural. Thanks, New Directions. I'm really excited about that. I'm excited for people to get those packages in the mail. But I'm going to start today with another giveaway. I want to just get this done even before we get into the what are you reading, though I do want to get there too. Because our guest, as many of you know, last week was Mark Haber, and we're both fans of his books, Reinhardt's Garden and St. Sebastian's Abyss. And I reached out to him. He works at Brazos Bookstore, as we've said before too. And I said, hey, if we do a giveaway and we purchase the books to send from Brazos Bookstore, do you think you could sign them for our winners? And he said, absolutely. So we're going to, thanks to Patreons and all of that, we're going to put some money towards buying those two books. So one winner, two books, both from Brazos Bookstore, and both of them signed by Mark Haber, the author, our guest and our friend.
Yeah, that's exciting.
It is exciting. And I'm very excited for folks who have been discovering these books. I've seen Reinhardt's Garden pop up a few times on people that I follow on Instagram. I've seen even more of St. Sebastian's Abyss popping up in general. These are excellent books. Fun to read because Mark's got a great way with language and with these rhythmic, just you can't stop reading sentences like rants. Only in Reinhardt's Garden in particular, I think it's Hernan Diaz who has a cover quote on there that says, melancholy has never been so euphoric. And that's how it feels at times. You're reading about melancholy and you're just like, man, this is so beautiful.
I know.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
So
they're both such great books. And yeah, so I'm excited for some new people to continue to discover them. And like you said, it's been so great to see that he's getting, I wouldn't say a resurgence because it's not like he's been around forever and ignored, but I mean, he's building momentum and more and more people are hearing about it through word of mouth. And also I feel like it's starting to break out into the press a lot more, and it's well-deserved for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And so, yes, one lucky winner will get both of those books. I need to check on international shipping, but I'll figure out a way if our winner is from somewhere else in the world other than the United States. congratulations. We will still get these to you.
That's great.
So, all right. Now, how do you enter? I'm going to make this one simple too, simply because I did not sit down and think about a game or something like that. So I just need you to email mookseandgripes@gmail.com with a Mark Haber giveaway or giveaway, whatever you want to call it in the email. And it again, it's not like that will disqualify if you don't do that. That's not a hurdle to enter. It just makes things as they come in a little bit easier to keep track of. I don't lose these. I do flag them all. It just is that one extra thing that makes it easier for me to see. A little less friction on my end. But just say giveaway, and then inside of your email, just say I would love to enter the giveaway for Mark Haber's books or something along those lines. Very simple this time. Hope a
Yeah.
lot of people have an opportunity to enter, and I look forward to getting those emails. You can, of course, share other thoughts with us if you'd like to, but you don't have to do anything other than just an email that says, "Here I am."
Awesome. And even if you've read them or you own a couple copies already, I would say you could always enter to win anyways, and then give them away and continue to spread the word about Mark, because I
That's
think
true.
giving those books away to a friend would be a great thing to do.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, Paul, what have you been reading?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start off on a high note for this episode. I think this will make you very happy, Trevor. So, my wife had a bunch of Audible credits, and as many of you may know that have Audible, like once you get those credits built up, it's so hard to like get rid of them because you have to try to get out of this. Like it's like a pyramid scheme or something. But anyway, so she had a bunch built up, and she was trying to use them, and so I said, "Well, I have an idea." And so she lent me one of them to use on a book you may have heard of, Trevor, called Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson.
No, Paul. I'm a little bit nervous though too
No.
here.
Yeah, no, I've been listening to it over the last week, and I'm really enjoying it. It's been just delightful. It's a nice plunge back into the fantasy world, but as you've mentioned before, he definitely has that talent to stand out. I mean, in a overcrowded kind of, that genre can have some stinkers as we've talked about, but he definitely has whatever it is, with the capital I, to kind of make himself stand out. And you talked about like how you'll be like 20 pages into a prelude and starting to get really connected to the characters, and all of a sudden he's like, okay, now we're going to switch to a completely different part of, maybe a different decade, or down the road, a few miles or whatever. But even when he does that, he has this way of quickly getting you to buy into the next set of characters, which is really impressive because, I don't know if that's a trope that goes back to Tolkien. I remember like in The Lord of the Rings, my kids would get so frustrated because you'd be all invested in Frodo and Samwise, and all of a sudden Tolkien would like skip you over, and all of a sudden you're like over in this other part of Middle Earth and all that. So I know that that's like a common fantasy thing, but he's very good at, within a page or two, you're already ready for whoever you're meeting next and diving in. So anyway, yeah, it's great. I'm really enjoying it. You and I were chatting a little bit. He was on an episode of Literary Disco recently where they were talking about fantasy, and I think it was this one, I'm sure it was, where he said he got the idea it was kind of like a heist novel,
Mm-hmm.
but a
Mm-hmm.
fantasy twist. And yeah, however far I'm in, a third of the way, or whatever I am, a quarter of the way in, definitely picking up on that. So it's really fun.
That's great, and I do think they just get better. These Mistborn
Mm-hmm.
books. So if you like it, I do hope that you'll keep going and see kind of what I mean by it. It's fun. It's a good book, and then all of a sudden kind of blows your mind with what else he's throwing in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's been great. And then one other one that I have been reading is was inspired by the most recent episode of the One Bright Book podcast, where they were talking about Lolly Willows and Sylvia Townsend Warner. And I read that one and really enjoyed it probably a couple years ago. And so after listening to that episode while I was stranded in the Austin airport for a few hours, I was trying to think, like I was thinking I need to read more of her stuff. And then I saw, I think it was on the NYRB sale that you picked up, Summer Will Show is one of your books.
I did, yeah.
And
I tried to complete my collection of their
nice.
Sylvia Townsend Warner books.
Yeah, so that kind of inspired me. I was like, which one of hers should I read? And I was like, well, I'll do that one. So it's really good so far. I'm probably about halfway through, and I'll just give a really quick. It's about a woman named Sophia Willoughby. She's a young English woman. She's very well off, and she has very strong opinions. And her husband go through some trouble where he's basically unfaithful. and he has this mistress who lives off in Paris. And so Sophia basically kicks him out and says, I'm going to devote myself entirely to my children. But there's a twist where something very tragic happens. And so the first big section of the book is kind of her dealing with her world being turned upside down, both by her husband being gone and then this tragedy that strikes. And so that first section, I was underlining and marking like crazy. And then, speaking of pulling the rug out from under you, it moves to this other section where she goes to Paris. And so now the section I'm reading is a lot about the revolution that took place in 1848. And she's kind of getting, I wouldn't say swept up in it, but she's meeting some of the people who are involved and everything. So it's very interesting. It's very different than the first section. So I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go from here, although I do have some ideas. But anyway, yeah, she is just a really interesting writer. And every time I read her books, they're so odd, but like, I don't know, there's something about them that she's one of those that you think about her books, for months and months after you finish them. So anyway, I think you made a good choice on your purchase.
Yeah, that was a fun sale to participate in.
Mm-hmm.
My birthday's coming up, so it was easy for me to say, "Hey, honey, there's this sale. I'm going to order me some books. It won't even be very much because they're going to
Yeah,
be. I'm going to order enough of them to make them 40% off."
exactly.
And then
Nice.
there was the
See,
Harvard bookstore sale.
I know
That
this time around, that's the one I took advantage of, but I still got almost exclusively NYRB. So,
oh, that's fun. Well, so I'm reading a few books right now. For my two oldest sons, we are reading out loud, and then there were none. It
oh,
has to come up
nice.
in some episode.
Exactly. We already mentioned Brandon Sanderson. We have to mention that one
Yes,
too.
yes, yes. And they're really enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun with that. For my two youngest ones, today we will finish the first book of the Percy Jackson series.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one's called The Lightning Thief. And that's been fun too to read with them. My wife has been trying to get me to read those for what they've been out 15, almost 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
The first one anyway. And she read them and she always said, the first one's all right, but they get really good. I think you'll really like them. You should read them to the kids. And I'm always like, well, how am I going to read the first one that's just all right?
Mm-hmm.
But it has been fun and really nice to do that with the younger two. But on my own, I've got two books to share with you. One of them just came in the mail from the UK, and it's the next Jonathan Stroud book in his Scarlet and Brown series. So the
Nice.
first one was called, I think, The Outlaws Scarlet and Brown. These are going to get confusing if he keeps this up. This one's called The Notorious Scarlet and Brown. I'm always going to be like, just call it book one, book two.
I know.
But this was a lot of fun. The reason I ordered it from the UK is that it doesn't come out in the US until March of next year,
Oh, geez.
which is just silliness to me. And
Mm-hmm.
plus, the US cover for the first one was just absolutely horrific and awful. It didn't show any sense of the book style,
Mm.
the underlying things that I like. Like it has Scarlet, I think, on the cover jumping out of a window with bubble gum and
Oh.
blowing a bubble, and I'm like, that it is not that kind of book. It is he's it starts out with death and murder and that they're outlaws, and there's kind of an undead element. There's a lot
Mm.
of harsh things in a great setting, and you guys made it look so stupid.
Yeah.
And so I just thought I'm going to keep on doing this UK thing, especially since I can get the
Nice.
books so much sooner. But that's been
Yeah.
fun to get back into. And then one that I think that you will be particularly interested in is I couldn't wait, but I just got the arc of Hannah Orstevik's Tiamo.
Mm.
Comes out
Very.
from Archipelago here in a few months. I think it's September is when this one comes out. But this is translated from the Norwegian by Martin Aitken again. And let me just read you the first little bit here. This is why I couldn't wait to keep going with it. Here's how she starts it. I love you. We say it to each other all the time. We say it instead of saying something else. What would that something else be? You. I'm dying. Us. Don't leave me. Me. I don't know what to do. Before. I don't know what I'll do without you when you're not here anymore. Now. I don't know what to do with these days, all this time in which death is the most obvious of all things. I love you. You say it at night when you wake up in pain or between dreams and reach out for me. I say it to you when my hand finds your skull, which has become small and round in my palm now that your hair is almost gone, or when I stroke you gently to get you to turn over and stop snoring. I love you. And then it, keeps going. But
Whew.
yeah, this is a harder, book in many ways than the other things on my list.
Right.
That I just, a bunch of kind of fun storybooks. But in this one, she's talking about someone, her cancer-stricken husband in the final months of his life.
Mm.
And it is, September is when it comes out. This is their third book by her that they're putting out, and I kind of hope they keep on going. So,
Oh, me too. As you know, she's a huge favorite of mine, and Love in particular, but The Pastor was also wonderful. And
yeah.
yeah, I've had my eyes on that one. I think we even mentioned it during our Looking Ahead episode, or maybe it was our Archipelago episode as one of the top ones. And just, man, that passage that you read, I'm ready. It sounds like it'll be tough, but her writing, I don't know. It's fairly simple. It's not overly ornate or anything, but man, she packs a punch.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sometimes hard maybe to read a sentence and get a sense of that, but then you read several
Yeah.
and it's like what other people do with words to make a great sentence, she does with sentences to make just really powerful paragraphs and things like that.
No, absolutely.
With that happy note,
Mhm.
why don't we start talking about today's topic? This was inspired by our friend Rebecca Hussey, one of the hosts of the One Bright Book podcast. She was on Twitter a few months ago now and kind of said she's not sure what's going on with between her and Robert Valser. Do you remember this, Paul?
I do.
you know, kind of saying I've tried his books several times and it doesn't connect with me. I don't understand why other people like him. The thing that I really liked about the way she put it, though, is it wasn't dismissive of everybody who likes him. It wasn't, man, I'm the only smart one. The emperor has no clothes. You hear that
Right.
so often when you say I love this book, you get people coming to tell you you shouldn't.
Yeah, you're wrong.
Because they didn't. And I'll be honest, I get that with Brandon Sanderson quite a bit because of this podcast. There are a lot of our listeners who don't jive with him, but who try him, I guess, because of my enthusiasm, and they do not like it. They don't rate his writing, as anything special. And
Right.
I would have to say, well, if again, we're all looking for different things, and I would agree with you. Brandon Sanderson is not Hannah Orstavik,
Right.
in terms of these powerful little sentences. There's something different going on there. And I'm totally, I get it. Not always will an author be serving what you want.
Right.
But I did like that Rebecca just kind of said, these are authors that I don't connect with. And saying, I love walking literature, which is Valser. I need to I need to find the book that makes me fall in love. And I think I told her, well, you need to read The Walk by Valser.
Yeah.
And she has.
Oh, yeah. Didn't do it.
It just didn't work. But this is the thing that I liked how she put it. Because we all have authors we simply don't like.
Right.
I know I don't like them. I don't care. Maybe I even do think others are silly for liking them. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little snobbish, or I just think that author is an awful perspective on things. And so I know that. And that's maybe not the most fun thing to sit down and have a podcast about.
Right.
But she put, I guess all of these authors are ones I feel I should like. I just haven't figured them out yet or haven't fallen under their spell. And then she kind of, clarified again in a way that I really liked. Yes, the authors I don't understand and that won't let me go. And so that's the way I wanted to approach this topic is, why do we feel this way sometimes? That we don't like a book or we don't like an author, and yet when their next one comes out, we're going to check it out.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk a little bit later after we announce our New Directions giveaway about some particular examples from our reading experiences. But let's kind of start with that. I think it's an interesting interesting topic. I think I first put on my document where I took notes authors I don't like. I
Right.
knew I was going to not do it that way, but I did kind of think, well, what's the difference between an author I don't like and an author I feel like I just their time hasn't come yet, or I have some morsel of faith that I will start to
Eventually.
like them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I did something very similar. I have a list at the bottom of my document that's just like, these are the authors I don't like, and I'm fine with that. And I don't really
We'll share
plan
those
to.
privately with each other.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, but then I was trying to think of that next interesting twist, and there definitely are some like that. And I was trying to think of why, what, like you said, what's the difference between those? And I think for me, one of the things is, as so often with us, it's kind of those trusted people that who keep continuously talking about this author, or he or she comes up again and again, or they'll share a passage and it blows you away, but then you try to read the whole book and it doesn't click. So for me, a lot of it is just like so much in the bookish community. There's these people that I know from having had so many books that we both love, that we share a lot of common ground and we tend to like the same things from literature. So for some of these authors where certain people keep saying how great they are and I keep trying and I don't get it, I'm like, okay, it's got to be me, because there's got to be something that I'm just not getting yet. Or as we've talked about, sometimes different times of the year, different times of your life, something clicks where all of a sudden, oh, I get it. Now it works for me. So I would say that's one of the top things for me, is just kind of the trust of friends and critics, or, bloggers or whoever, that have built up over the years, where I'm like, okay, there's got to be something to this more than just, I don't like it.
Well, and thinking about this, let's throw it on the one. Let's explore one of these threads where it's simply an author that you don't like, and the people recommending it, it's not going to ever be one for you.
Mm-hmm.
But we still want to go through it. Is it that we've kind of created an idea based on the people who recommended it because we've
Mm.
already liked the books that they've recommended in the past? And so when they talk about a certain other book or other author, we kind of think, well, that's totally for me.
Mm-hmm.
But we're thinking of something else, maybe not consciously, maybe not, we don't have an exact picture, but it just doesn't meet our expectations because, it's like when you read a really great book blurb and then you read the book and it's just not very good. The blurb made your mind, well, or maybe the book is really good, but it doesn't match. The blurb made you go a certain way, a certain feeling that you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to capture from a book, and it didn't provide that. And so you're disappointed, even though, well, that was still a really good book. Just,
Right.
but I'm disappointed in it. You know,
Yeah.
I think maybe you and I both. I'm going out on a limb here. I
Okay.
think both of us are pretty susceptible to loving things that we read.
Mm-hmm.
I think I I think I tend, especially if there's a lot of enthusiasm behind books, I think I tend to figure out a way to connect with it. And I don't mean I manipulate myself into enjoying it or buying into the hype and I have to be part of that, because I don't think I care about that. I could be just talking myself out of things right now, reinforcing a little bit of self delusion.
No, I think it's
But
more that there's different ways of approaching a book or a movie, where you go into it and you give it the benefit of the doubt, or you can go into it, not give it the benefit of the doubt, but I mean, you go into it with a certain mindset where you are trying to meet it where it is. Or there's the alternative, which a lot of people do, which to me doesn't seem like what I want to get out of books and literature, is you go into it skeptical and kind of looking to pick it apart from the very beginning. So I think a lot of it's just
mhm.
mindset. And then the other thing I would say is, both you and I spend so much time thinking about books, talking to people about books, reading about books, that I think a lot of times by the time I pick up a book, there's at least a decent chance that I know enough about it where I wouldn't have picked it up if I thought it just completely wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that does eliminate some of just the low hanging fruit of just, that is not a book for me, clearly, so that I would never pick it up. So I think part of it is that you're not just walking, I mean, not that we would never do this, but you're not stuck at the airport and you just walk up and you've never heard of the author or the book and you just pick it up on a whim because of the cover and read it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying I would never do that, but I think when some people do that, then automatically you go into it maybe with a different mindset,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
I think it would be hard for me to come up with a list of authors that I just hate, because if I'm not enjoying a book, I don't finish it. and I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel bad and I don't go back to that author. I don't look back. And
Right.
kind of like you're saying, I you know, I get a lot of books I've never heard of in the mail, but they're always from publishers who know me
Mm-hmm.
and who have chosen this book for one reason or another. And I don't always like them, but I never think they're so stupid for liking this. It's usually like, oh, that's not my cup of tea,
Right.
you know, and I'm okay with that. And I don't, and so I'm kind of with you. There's a lot that I don't think I get into that part where I'm just, you know, one book after another from the bestseller list or something like that. That I've done that before, and I know that that's not my way of finding books I love.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some great ones on there, but a lot of them aren't going to, you know, it doesn't have the best ratio for me.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think we get these books from people that we trust,
Mm-hmm.
and it just doesn't connect, you know? It just doesn't quite work.
Well, and you mentioned something with the blurbs too. I think that's something I was going to touch on is whether it's a book an author you've already read or one that you're interested in. I do think that kind of the marketing and hype machine can kind of impact things even from an author you've already read where it's a book you would otherwise probably have enjoyed, but due to the way it was packaged or marketed or overhyped sometimes, or at least in my opinion overhyped, that can also taint things because sometimes if you go with a book that you have a vague idea of what it's about, but you don't really have too many expectations going in, that can really lead to some wonderful surprises where you didn't know what to expect and it ends up being one of the top 10 books you read all year, for example, or something like that. But on the flip side, when some of these books are so hyped and praised, sometimes you go in and you're like, okay, this book is going to blow my mind, like there's no way I'm not going to like this, and it turns out to be a solid book or even a good book, but it can never match those expectations that are kind of set up for it. So I think that has played, like there's an author that I'll mention later where I do think like that's been a factor in
Hmm.
the way that I've not been able to fully connect with him because of just those initial few times that I tried to read him. I was expecting like some world changing event and it just wasn't that.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
So we've kind of been talking about the one thread of here's maybe the reason we even encounter these books that we end up not liking as much as we would like to. What about the second one though? Why do we feel still a desire to connect with that book? Why are these the ones we're talking about today ones that we aren't quite willing to dismiss and, you know, in some ways maybe even develop really strong relationships with simply
Mm-hmm.
because we are on a quest to have our faith in these authors and in our friends fulfilled, you know?
Right.
Why do you have some of these that you didn't get along with and you're not sure why people love them, but you're going to keep on pushing yourself into that relationship? Why are these not so easy to you know, to drop?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's different answers for some of the different authors, obviously, but I think one of the things for me, like with a few of the authors that came to mind for me, there were books in the past that I did like, but then later on I lost the connection. And so I think sometimes it's like that search for, there
Yeah.
was something there at one point, and
I've
is
got
it
that
the
on my
fact?
list a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, have I changed? Has the author changed? Will that spark ever be struck again, or is it just done? And so I think it's kind of that chase for something that almost was or kind of was, and like you see the potential there, but it's like, will it ever happen? So I think that's one example for me
Mm-hmm.
that comes to mind at first. You said, do you have some of that too?
Yeah, definitely a few of my authors, maybe one or two of them that I'll bring up later
Mm-hmm.
on are in that boat a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like just there are things about an author that really intrigue you. you know Again, I'm kind of looking at my list, and I'll go into more detail when we get into the specifics,
Yeah.
but like there are certain things about the books that you really do like, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not quite enough to overcome the things that don't work for you. But it's like that yet. Maybe, maybe there'll be that time where the balance shifts and all of a sudden what you do like about an author will kind of take over and overpower the stuff that doesn't quite work for you. So that's definitely something else. It's, I guess, the theme with both of those is kind of potential.
Yeah,
You
there's
see
the
that
hope.
potential. Yeah.
And that's where I wanted to kind of see if we got to, because in my
Mhm.
mind I was thinking this is kind of a hopeful episode in a way, and these relationships with these authors are hopeful. They can
Mhm.
be frustrating. When we get to my list, these are authors who have frustrated me
Yeah.
because I feel like they don't deliver. And then I think, well, maybe it's just me, and it probably is just me. And there was something there. I just, am I maturing into someone who likes it? Am I growing a sensibility that I don't have yet? A sensitivity to certain types of books or ideas that at first, it's kind of like I always tell my kids when we sit down to eat something new, oh, Dad, I don't like this. Well, no, your brain isn't used to it. You don't know what to
Mm-hmm.
do with that taste in your mouth right now. You'll like
Right.
it. That's hopeful and maybe
Thanks.
a little bit pushy, but but I do feel that way sometimes with books too, where the first time I might read a certain style or certain thematic elements in a certain way, it's new and kind of twisted and maybe uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm just not quite ready for it yet.
Right.
And I will develop that over time, and then they may become favorite authors, and I might even somehow sense that in them right
Mm-hmm.
now, and that's why I realize, oh, it's just not me. Now, I'm not saying that's like Rebecca's relationship with Valser is that she's just developing into that kind of So some of these are people that we're just not ever going to jive with,
Right.
because it isn't the way we look at the world or the way we want to see things, and or the things that other people might be impressed with in the style or the way that it connects with something. Maybe it's similar to something we read in our youth, and so there's more going on than just the words on the page,
Yeah.
and this just is we're just not going to have that experience with it ever. But it's kind of a fun thing to think about, I thought, because there are these authors that I don't really like, but that I have hopes that I will. And I even get excited when new books come out from them.
Maybe this is the one.
Yep. In fact, every author on my list is someone who could have a new book come out any year, any given year. None of them are authors who are dead. So yeah, and I get excited for other people who are excited about them. So,
Mm-hmm.
but any other thoughts just in general? I'm sure continue to explore the ideas as we talk about the particular authors on our list. But
Yeah. The only other thing I would mention, kind of just piggybacking off what you just said, was I think for me personally, like not trying to prescribe what anybody should do with their reading, but for me personally, I think it's important to continue. There's lots of books out there that I know I'll love, or like favorite authors that I can return to again and again. I do think that there's something, in my opinion, kind of healthy, and I don't mean like in a vegetables way, but just for like continuing to expand your mind and try things that may or may not work. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's just, I don't want to ever be that person who just settles into a certain thing and that's all I read and that's all I do. So this is one example of how I think that could continue to happen, is just you don't give up on somebody just because it doesn't work the first couple times. You continue to kind of explore and be curious, and that doesn't mean that eventually you won't say, okay, never mind, I'm going to quit. That's the end. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but I just think that for me personally in my reading life, some of these authors that continue to kind of stick in your brain, I think there's a reason for it, and it's just kind of fun and interesting to continue to do that rather than just giving up and settling into something is safe.
no, that's a good point. And again, fun. There may be times when it's like, okay, I need to go back to Old Faithful,
Right.
and they can be thrilling. It's not that that's just a comfort, nostalgic kind of thing. Maybe they're challenging as well, but it's challenging in a way that we're comfortable with.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
but it is nice to branch out. But I'm with you. There are probably people who wouldn't get that same thrill by reading authors that they don't like, or trying
Mm-hmm.
trying them again. I'm like you. It's like far be it from me to tell you what to do with your time,
Right.
especially when it's time that you are spending reading something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's fun to have these untapped potential that you can sense. It's like something kind of on the horizon that's just kind of vibrating there, and you're like, oh, if I can only touch it, there'll be
Mm-hmm.
all this light and enlightenment or warmth or kind of a mind-blowing experience. I just can't quite reach it yet, and that's just
Yeah,
fun. It's fun
I
to
know.
to think about. So,
Exactly.
well, I'm excited to hear about which authors you have in particular, but we've got to take a little bit of a break. All right, Paul. It's time for the New Directions giveaway segment of our show. We will be drawing 3 winners. Again, the first person that we draw, that'll be the name that we submit to New Directions for their, New Directions Classics, where their editors select a book a month to send out to their subscribers. So we'll be doing that, and then we will be doing their new release. And I still did not look up how to say this author's name. Alhird Bacharevich.
Sounds right.
I believe that it's a Belarusian name, because it's translated from the Belarusian by Petra Reed and Jim Dingley, and this is Alindarka's Children. So that one is the second name that we will draw. We'll be getting that book. And then the third one will be getting Mark Haber's choice of Matthias Enar's Compass, translated by Charlotte Mandel. So, you all know that before we draw names, we do have to share some of the emails that we got from folks. We got a lot of fun things to read, a lot of enthusiasm about certain books and all of that. And I will go ahead and read the first one, Paul, if that's okay with you.
Sounds perfect.
We did not put these in any order. We're not like building up to anything, or this is just some of the ones that we selected. This first one is from Pat Hicks. Pat says, "Hi fellas, one of my favorite authors in the New Directions backlist is Bohumil Hrabal. I actually picked this one for you, Paul, because I know you're a big fan too, and we've talked about him in Too Loud a Solitude. Specifically, I Served the King of England was the first one I read and fell in love with. Like all of his stuff I've read since, it's funny, larger than life in a way that hinges on magical realism and melancholy. Everything taking place in the shadow of major, dark historical moments. And maybe most importantly, it makes me want to sit in an old bar in Prague and enjoy a Pilsner."
Sounds wonderful.
As far as forthcoming releases, I'm a sucker for the design and concept of the storybook ND series. I'm also intrigued by Milkweed Smithereens and by Bernadette Meyer. I consider myself pretty unfamiliar with poetry in general, but I recently read Midwinter Day in the midst of a long Chicago winter and loved it, so would enjoy getting to know more of Meyer's works. Thanks, Pat.
That's great. The next one's from Anthony Garrett. He says, "I love Jessica Au's Cold Enough for Snow. I found it so beautiful and moving. It's a novel that shows when reviewers call a book simple, understated, spare, or any number of sibilant adjectives, they may confuse its size or the information it withholds from the reader, and in this case, its unnamed narrator, for its other qualities. Cold Enough for Snow is a novel rich in the senses. From the title onward, we get sensory images, cold enough, in relation to what's absent for snow. A page or a square of sidewalk doesn't pass without noticing what details might lie there. And in that vein, its exterior plot is easy to summarize. A daughter and mother vacation together in Japan. And the narrator does wonder what stories wait underneath surfaces, especially those of her mother's internal life and her past. But the gaps in the narrator's knowledge and her questions about those gaps makes the pair's visits to museums and restaurants more evocative. Many similar books might at their ends reveal a history of trauma that answers a reader's questions and informs all they had read to that point. But here, the narrator wonders whether she doesn't miss, in her words, the painting for the pentimenti. I adore this book for its imagery and its lyricism, which are among the primary reasons I would read any book, but Cold Enough for Snow raises those literary tools to the point of an ethics by gently asking me if I appreciate the objects and people in front of me, or if I instead erase them for a hidden meaning I don't yet have access to. And then it says, of New Direction's forthcoming titles, I'm most excited for Laszlo Krasznahorkai's A Mountain to the North, A Lake to the South, Paths to the West, A River to the East. I've long been a fan of Krasznahorkai's work, and the book's description seems like a return to some of his concerns in Szabo There Below, which is my favorite of his works. I love everything about the sound of this nature-centered work. Thank you for hosting this giveaway, and thank you for all the work you do for the literary community. Anthony Garrett." Well, thank you so much, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And I'm going to do a little bit of a preview of that Krasznahorkai book, if you don't mind, Paul, because I just got the ARC in the mail. And for listener, there were actually several people who talked about Krasznahorkai as being someone they haven't read yet but would like to. And so here's just a sense of that really long title.
Yeah, really long.
Starts with section 2, because why would Krasznahorkai start with section 1? What's the point of that?
Right.
And here's the first sentence, at least up to the semicolon. Krasznahorkai has long sentences, and if I read this whole first sentence, it actually goes on for 3 pages until we get to section 3. At least I think there's no other, period within all of this. But here's how it starts. And, just listen to the various routes he seems to be taking.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden you meet somebody somewhere in the middle of it, and you don't know who it is or what's going on, but it's still kind of thrilling. Says, the train did not run along tracks, but along a single terrifying blade edge, so that the balanced order of the city traffic, with its ominous frenzy and trembling inner panic that announced the arrival of the Kihon train, was the beginning. To get out at Shichijo Street, on the side where the Rashomon, now vanished without a trace, had once stood in the Fukuin district, and suddenly the buildings were different, the streets were different, as if at once the colors and forms had been lost. He sensed he was already outside the city limits. Altogether, with a single stop, he was outside of Kyoto, although of course the city's deepest secrets were not lost here, and especially so quickly. And so there he was, to the south, the southeast of Kyoto, and he started off from there along the narrow and labyrinthine streets, turning to the left or continuing straight ahead, then turning to the left again, and in the end he should have been beset by the greatest of doubts, and as a matter of fact he was. And yet he didn't stop. He made no inquiries and asked no directions, precisely the opposite. He went on asking nothing. He did not reflect. He did not hesitate at this or that corner, wondering which way now, because something suggested to him that he would still find what he was looking for. I actually read to the second semicolon because I didn't want to stop at the first one.
Well, that's exactly what he does to you.
Yep, exactly. I could have kept reading there too. It's it's great, and I do agree. It sounds a little bit more like Sable There Below,
Mm-hmm.
but this one's a lot shorter, a little bit more bite sized.
Yeah, it might be a great introduction for somebody who hasn't read him to just, have a short way to dip their toe in the water.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'll move on to the next one. This one is an email from Bonnie Renzi. It says, hi, Trevor and Paul. I really enjoyed the podcast on the New Directions books. I have several New Direction books on my shelf and look forward to more, but one that I read in 2018 was a real masterpiece. It was my second Jenny Erpenbeck book and did not disappoint. From a review I wrote at the time, Go Went Gone is a powerful story that points out the desperate state of refugees not only from Africa, but from many war-torn and despairing locations around the globe. The author has chosen to use poignant and touching vignettes to display the ways in which the struggle to find a safe home is transpiring in the world today. This book, which should touch all of us, depicts the racism and general lack of concern for these people often displayed by the residents of the country the refugees find themselves in. How can we put ourselves in their shoes? How can we help them to no longer be invisible, especially those of us residing in countries that were built by immigrants? And that, she says, originally published in 2017, it's all still very relevant today.
Hmm.
As I look at the New Direction's upcoming releases, I'm excited to see that The Bloater by Rosemary Tonks will be out in September, and it sounds like a doozy. It was already on my list of books to look for because it sounds a bit like it might be in the vein of The Dead Avocado and its heroine, the charming and hilarious Sally J. Gorse. The Bloater, by the way, is an internationally known opera singer that the protagonist, Min, is considering sleeping with. London in the 60s is in hysterical and humorous terms. What's not to like? And then she says, whether I win or not, I will be buying The Bloater and a lot of others on their backlist because that's what I do. Thanks for adding to my overcrowded shelves, Bonnie.
That's great. So the next one is from Herb Randall. It says, Dear Mookse and Gripes podcast, a.k.a. Trevor and Paul. I'm one of those benighted or fortunate souls, depending on how you look at it, for whom the New Directions back catalog is terra incognita. So it is with delight and not a little trepidation that your contest has spurred me to peruse the list, and oh my, am I in trouble. Approaching the catalog as a newbie is a near impossible task. How to tackle such a vast and impressive collection that extends back to 1938? I started with personally significant years, birth, graduation dates, great loves, birth of children, etc. I moved on to historically important years. Eventually, I was reduced to randomly clicking on interesting sounding titles from authors I'm not familiar with, as if browsing through the shelves at a favorite bookshop. In short, the list of books I want to read from New Directions is now enormous and unmanageable. Join the club. With great wailing and gnashing of teeth, I narrowed it down to River of Fire by Kuratulain Hyder. In the last year or so, I've been trying to break out of my regular diet of Slavic literature. Casting a wider net has led me to the tale of Genji, the Alexandria Quartet, and most recently, Mufuz's Cairo trilogy. I've greatly enjoyed these epic reads, written by new to me authors, and set in places and times far from my own experience and expertise. Hyder's River of Fire looks like an ideal continuation of this journey, both in illuminating a history I know little about, with dazzling techniques splashed across an enormous canvas from an authentic voice. Having thus done the impossible by narrowing down my back catalog choice to just this one, I'm going to indulge myself by declaring a toss up for the works I'd want to read first from the forthcoming titles. The tie in to the tale of Genji, in a mountain to the north, a lake to the south, pass to the west, a river to the east, appeals to me since that work was one of the most memorable reading experiences I've had in recent years. Plus, that cover is just genius. I can't pass up a good cover, whether with books or music albums, and have rarely regretted it. Now, having said that I'm branching out from Slavic literature doesn't mean I'm abandoning it, and so my other choice for an upcoming title has got to be Bakarevic's Alan Darka's Children. In a time when speaking, writing, or even selling books in Belarusian is both figuratively and literally transgressive, I want to do what I can to support their struggle. I'm a connoisseur of the art of translation, too, and the idea that this is translated from Belarusian and Russian into English and Scot is fascinating. I don't know if I'm going to... Should I...
Good luck, Paul.
All right, here I go. It's hard to breathe. Your Hans skedaddle. I mean, who couldn't resist that? And apologies for that slaughtering of the pronunciations there. He says, besides considering my entry in your contest, I have one favor to request of New Directions. Please don't run a huge sale anytime soon. I just succumbed to NYRB's 40% off flash sale. My bank account needs a little time to recover. Much obliged, though I suspect I'll need to start clearing some bookshelf space soon. Kindly, Herb. A lot I can relate to in that one.
Yep,
Good
I
stuff.
thought so too. The next one I'll read is from Aidan Mulshine. It says, Hi, Trevor and Paul. I was unfamiliar with New Directions Publishing before your episode, but looking through their catalog, I see lots of books that I recognize, but none that I've actually bought yet. One book that stands out is Judith Shalansky's An Inventory of Losses. I've seen this book at my local store multiple times, and I'm always drawn to it, but I've never pulled the trigger and bought it. I find the idea of memories and history centered around specific objects very compelling, and I would like to read it soon. I also looked through the list of upcoming releases, and based on the pull quotes from one of my favorite filmmakers, Wong Kar-wai, I like Desai a lot. I would really like to check out The Setting Sun. Thanks for a great episode.
That's great. And I would just say that, yeah, an inventory for losses, definitely worth picking up. You should go for it. The next one says is from Joe Mochnik, and it says, Hi, Trevor and Paul. Thanks for another amazing episode and a chance at a giveaway from a favorite publisher. While I love my New Directions copy of Cesar Ira, Yoko Tawada, and Hiroko Oyamada, my most treasured and well-worn backlist title is The Book of Disquiet, the complete edition by Fernando Pessoa, which I read and carried with me on my travels in Portugal. This was the perfect book to dip in and out of, often enjoyed and dog-eared in cafes, bars, and parks around Lisbon. It's a special book, a lovely edition, and reading Pessoa also really opened up the city and culture to me. Looking ahead to the fall, I'm greatly anticipating Too Much of Life by Clarice Lispector, which sounds like it will be a treasure trove of the author's essays, memoirs, serialized stories, and other pieces. This should be a fantastic collection and a must-have for Lispector fans. Thanks again, and happy summer reading. Joe.
All right, and I'll do one more. This is from Wendy Whitten. It says, Hello. The backlist book I'd select is Celine's Journey to the End of the Night. I'm about halfway through St. Sebastian's Abyss, and I love it. So if Mark Haber recommends Celine, I'm confident it is a classic I would enjoy. The upcoming book I will buy is Spadework for a Palace by Laszlo Krasznahorkai. I've only read novellas The Last Wolf and Herman, The Game Warden and Death of a Craft, his multimedia books Animal Inside and Chasing Homer, and one novel, Satan Tango. But I have all of his books and will read every one of them. Krasznahorkai is brilliant. Thank you so much, and good luck to all the entrants. Wendy. All right. Well, I'll just echo Wendy there. Good luck to all of the entrants.
Yeah.
And let's go ahead and draw our winners, Paul. All right. So I will go on to a random number generator. All right, Paul, do you want to say congratulations to our lucky winner?
Yep, I will do it. Yeah, congratulations to Pat Hicks.
All right, Pat, that is the maybe the grand prize, the subscription to 1 year's worth of the New Directions Classics catalog. Congratulations. Wow. Pat, I will reach out so that I can get an address so that we can send that over to New Directions.
Yeah, that's exciting. Congratulations.
All right, Paul. Our next winner is actually someone who got in right at the end of the contest.
All right. Second winner is Melanie Nichols. Congratulations.
All right. That's the copy of Alan Darka's Children. Congratulations.
That's the one with the awesome cover, right?
Yeah, I love that cover.
Mm-hmm.
And our next one, this is the copy of Compass by Matthias Senard, is going to go to
Sarah Gore. Congratulations, Sarah.
All right. And thank you, everybody, for entering. That was a lot of fun. I know we're maybe a little bit indulgent in reading the long emails, but what do you... I guess I'm one who... What would I cut out? You know, do I just read one paragraph from some of these really friendly and fun emails? No. We'll try and give you all a good sense of some of those that came in.
Well, plus I feel like a lot of these people could write, ad copy, because as we've said before, as I'm reading those, I'm like jotting down a bunch of ones that I want to get too. People are so good at describing both the books they've read and the reasons why they want to read these authors. So I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We accept the punishment of adding new books to our piles too.
Exactly. We have to let people get revenge on us for all of our suggestions.
All right. Well, congratulations again to the winners. Thanks, everybody, for entering. Don't forget that at the beginning of this episode, we had another giveaway for Mark Haber's books, which we'll be drawing out here in a couple of weeks when we record again. But now let's get back to the main part of our show. All right, Paul, are you ready to do this?
I'm ready.
Tell me the authors that you just can't quite connect to, that I love, and that are really going to hurt my feelings.
That's what I'm waiting for, to step on your toes here. I'm afraid that'll happen. But yeah, no, I'm ready. You want me just to kick it off?
Kick it off, yeah.
All right. Well, the first one I'm going to bring up is somebody that I read probably 15 or 20 years ago at least, and he's just so beloved by seemingly everyone. I'm sure that's not the case, but David Mitchell. He's an author. I remember back probably when you and I first met, he was just going nuts. People were just raving about him and talking about how much they loved him. And okay, so I've tried quite a few of his books. I've read Cloud Atlas. I've read The Thousand Autumns of Jacob Dezoet. I've read what is it, Number 9 Dream, I think it is.
Yeah.
And then all of them, it's like, I don't quite get where all the hype
But you keep
from.
trying.
I keep trying. And one of the reasons I keep trying is I read one called Black Swan Green that I really liked. And it's interesting because I think it's been a while since I've read it, so I might not be completely accurate with this, but I feel like it's one of his more straightforward books. And so I could see, he is clearly very talented. There's something there that I could get. And even in the ones that I didn't care for, there's just that little bit of a glimmer where I'm like, almost there. And he's the one that I was going to say, I was talking about being overhyped and the way that he's described, maybe turning me off a little bit sometimes. And I just wanted to read a little bit of this blurb, and I'll give you an idea of what I find kind of off-putting. And it's not necessarily his fault, but it says, a postmodern visionary and one of the leading voices in 21st century fiction, David Mitchell combines flat-out adventure, a Nabokovian love of puzzles, a keen eye for character, and a taste for mind-bending, philosophical, and scientific speculation in the tradition of Umberto Eco, Haruki Murakami, and Philip K. Dick. The result is brilliantly original fiction, as profound as it is playful. And it just goes on and on for like 2 more paragraphs. I'll read the very last part too. It says, it gives a summary and then it says, but the story doesn't even end there. The narrative then boomerangs back through centuries in space, returning by the same route in reverse to its starting point. And it says, as wild as a video game, as mysterious as a Zen koan, Cloud Atlas is an unforgettable tour de force that, like its incomparable author, has transcended its cult classic status to become a worldwide phenomenon. And I just, like, again, I'm not saying it's his fault, but I read it, and I think I probably had some of that in my mind when I started it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm reading it, and I'm like, this is a pretty good book. Like, but I don't know, a postmodern visionary, one of the leading voices in 21st century fiction. Like, I just don't feel like maybe the substance is backing up all of the flash and the excitement. So he's one, but like I said, there's still something there. It's not to say that, I mean, some of that is true. I would just take it down about 19 notches. But like, I understand what's going on. I understand why people would like him, but to me, it's just not everything that I kind of hope it will be.
Yeah.
And so I keep going back and hoping maybe something will click eventually. And again, like I said, I did really like Black Swan Green. So it's not that I don't think he has a lot of talent, but it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just the hype.
Your expectation that things you were led to hope for and to find in these books didn't quite land.
Right.
Well, you're not stepping on my toes there too much.
Okay.
But I will tell you, one of my all-time just favorite everything, when it comes to reading, a time of life. I was in London, living there in 2004. That's where my wife and I met, was that time in London. So I got to London right about the time that the Booker long list was announced, and then a month or so later, out comes the short list, and I went out and bought all of the books. And Paul, it was an amazing time to be there for that. I don't know if it's still like this or if I was just walking certain pathways, but one of my taxi drivers talked to me about Cloud Atlas.
Wow.
That was just in the air, and it was so fun. And at that time, I had not read a single word about Cloud Atlas in the press or anything. I didn't have like an iPhone or a dedicated computer, or anything like that. So I was just, let me go on the computer, everybody, for a few minutes here, and I'll see what the list is, and then I'll just run to the bookstore. So I didn't have any expectations going into it, and I loved Cloud Atlas.
Yeah.
So it really could have been something like that. But part of the reason that it still sits so pleasantly in my memory is just that time of life. It was awesome. However, I did not. I did go on and read like Black Swan Green and really liked it. But I did not like most of the rest of the work that I've read from him. He probably could be an author I'd put on this list too. The Jacob de Zoet book was a really fun premise, and then just kind of surface bound, I felt.
Exactly.
And so I'm with you on David Mitchell in general, though I will just say that Cloud Atlas can be magical. If you're living in London and having all those fun conversations with people.
Right. No, I could definitely see that, and I do. The one reason why I'm reluctant to even kind of poke a little fun at it is, that I'm all for people taking big swings and trying ambitious things and going for it, and I do feel like, I respect that he did that there. Just for me, it didn't quite land, but I could totally see, like you said, it might have just been in the right circumstances. It might have been a completely different story, and that's why I like I said, I'm not ready to give up on him.
Yeah. Well, like I say, no one had told me that he was, visionary postmodernist guru of the 21st century or anything like that. So, but I do appreciate you citing my blurb.
Exactly. Written from the back of a taxi cab in London.
All right. Well, the one that I want to bring up is someone that I always am excited to read their next book, and I do always love them, and then they falter, and I'm like, oh, I did it again. And that's Neil Gaiman. Do you read Neil Gaiman at all?
I do, and it's funny. I actually contemplated putting him on my list.
We need to get some. You and I are too connected on some of this stuff. I feel. I just think his ideas are so fun. I love listening to him talk about story making and about these stories that are coming to mind. And this is the promise that we were talking about. A new book of his comes out, and I think that sounds so fun. And I will read the first 90% of it and think this is really great. And I just don't feel like the landings are, at the end,
Mm-hmm.
ever quite pay off or get to where I want. Even some of his main books and main titles, they just kind of fizzle out, and I'm like, oh, I wish you could write better endings.
Yeah.
And then I would adore your books, but that's the part that always sticks in my mind and makes it so that I have a little bit of resistance. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes it so that it's unfair because now I look for it,
Right.
and that's not his fault. And some of it's probably my own issues because I know people just still love his books.
Mm-hmm.
And I get frustrated at myself, and I think, why can't I just love what I loved about it? Why does
Right.
my lasting feeling have to be one of disappointment when it could be one of, I loved 90 to 95% of that book, and that's enough for me. But I
Yeah.
guess it just kind of isn't. I want I want that promise that the first 95% at saying, hey, this is a great story, we're going to make sure you're impressed by the end of it. That promise doesn't get fulfilled, and that means a lot to me, I guess.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I think that's a common criticism that I have with, like, for example, the horror genre in general, whether it's movies or books, a lot of
Yeah,
times is all
we'll be
this great
talking about
buildup.
Stephen King soon, and that's a
Yeah. And
big
that's
problem I
something I
have with
think
his books.
exactly. And I think it's common across a lot of horror movies and books. And I think that's also maybe true of some other, action adventure or different things, but is that whole thing of, like you said, it's so good, but then when it comes to the grand reveal or the wrap up or something, it's like it can't quite do justice to the rest of the book. So no, it's
Hmm.
really interesting. I'm with you. I keep checking out his books. Usually I'll do an audiobook because I really like when he reads his own books. He does a really great job. His narration is wonderful. And so I'll listen to it even knowing that I may or may not like the book itself, but I just like to listen to him because, like you said,
Hmm.
his views of the world, his imagination, his ability to go back to like myths, and when he's
Yeah.
done different throwbacks to different myth story making and things like that is so fascinating. But I'm with you. There's always just a little bit missing for me too.
And it's interesting because I think stories are a series of promises to an extent. Like, they build up an atmosphere, they build up expectations of I don't know, of a journey that you're going to go on. And I guess to have it then just feel like it gets wrapped up at the end because there wasn't, I don't know how to really end this,
Yeah,
is just it's a little bit hard to take sometimes.
no,
But
I'm with you.
I'll be honest, I'm sitting here talking about him and thinking, oh, I should go read one of his books because that buildup is so fun,
Hmm.
and so interesting. And yeah, but anyway, so an author that I know people love, and I would love to love him more, just don't quite yet. But there's a part of me that thinks, if I can only get over my own hang up,
Hmm.
there's no reason to dismiss his work or to stop reading him. And I could even become, a bigger fan someday.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. All right, you ready for me to do another one? So my second one is, I don't know how much I'm going to have to say about this, so I'm hoping you might be able to. I think you might be a fan, so I'm a little nervous to say this one, but Marilyn Robinson.
Oh, I am a fan. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
But it's
Well,
okay. I have been smacked down by every person in my family, including my wife, about Marilyn Robinson.
really?
So yeah. So
Okay.
go
So I might
ahead.
be
Do
walking
it.
into
Do it
hornet's nest
again.
here.
Well, I'm just used to it.
So for me, it's this is I was reluctant to put her on because I feel like I haven't necessarily given her a fair shot yet. So this is mostly, well, actually entirely based on Gilead. Um, and so that's where I do feel like there's a lot of promise because I feel like that's not fair to rate an entire author based on only one book. But I don't know what it was about Gilead because on paper, everything that I read about it, everything I hear about it, I mean, it's right up my alley. I'll just really quickly, like it says in 1956, toward the end of Reverend John Ames's life, he begins a letter to his young son, an account of himself and his forebears. Ames is the son of an Iowan preacher and the grandson of a minister who, as a young man in Maine, saw a vision of Christ bound in chains and came west to Kansas to fight for abolition. He, quote, preached men into the Civil War, then at age 50 became a chaplain in the Union Army, losing his right eye in battle. So, I mean, I won't go on and on, but in a lot of ways, it reminds me of maybe like Tinkers by Paul Harding, or has like some echoes of maybe something like Stone, or not exactly, but some of these historical books that I've loved that go back and kind of focus on one specific life, and, maybe some quiet lives like we've talked about. But I don't know exactly what it was about it, but it kind of left me cold. And it surprised me because, again, this is another one. I think a common theme with me is maybe I went into it with too high of expectations, or just looking for certain things that weren't necessarily fair to the author based on what I thought I would find there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do own, I would say I own probably 3 or 4 of her other books. And so it's one, despite that I keep, anytime I see one of her books in a used bookstore, I'll still pick it up. And
Yeah.
it's that whole idea of like, that hope, like you said, I know that there's got to be one of these that I'll like. So I would be curious to hear what you love about it, or, maybe that would help me kind of untangle what didn't work for me.
I don't know, because a few years ago, it's been maybe 2 years ago, I chose it for a family book club.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody liked it. Including, like I said, my wife, who knows that I love it. And so they all kind of felt the same way. Like, I feel a little bad, but I'm kind of like, look, it's fine. You don't, maybe I ruined your way of just kind of wandering into this book on your own,
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, when I first read Gilead, it was probably a year or two after, well, probably in the first year that my first son was born.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the passages in there about love and this relationship with his son
Mm-hmm.
were so powerfully put to me. This sense that, hey, it's, in a way, you can do no wrong.
Yeah.
I love you and who you are. And I believed that. I was sitting
Mm-hmm.
there like, yeah, I can feel that. Like
Mm-hmm.
right now, you can do no wrong. I will never not love you. And I will always just be like, well, that is just you. There's something irreducible that is you. And it's not your actions. They don't add up to become you. It's who you are. And I just love that spark that is you. And I love how the book complicates that when his friend's son comes back and he absolutely hates this kid. And it's not a kid
Mm-hmm.
anymore, but Jack. He hates him, and he doesn't understand why his friend, a fellow reverend, a fellow preacher, is accepting him back into his life. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, this conflict of, here's my unconditional love that's kind of easy. My son is young,
Right.
right now and I'm not even going to be here when my son gets older because he's so old. That's a kind of a simplistic way of looking at it when you don't know the conflicts you might have that cause you to start to become separate, or proud, or the choices that son might make that disappoint you to the point where you can't comprehend it, but you do things or say things that are hateful, even if you don't
Mm-hmm.
hate your son. And I just loved that conflict there of here's my lofty preachery thoughts about unconditional love, and then in his own personal life, he realizes very late in life, I don't really understand any of this, do I?
Yeah.
I'm a preacher. I'm in my 70s, my later 70s, and I don't actually understand any of this. And
Yeah.
I just thought that was so fun. But again, my family, their issues, they just thought it was boring and didn't really like his voice. And I
Mm-hmm.
kind of was like, well, that's kind of the point. He's a
Right.
little
Right.
bit
Right.
proud and preachy. He's writing a journal for his son because he's got so much to teach his son.
Yeah.
It gets complicated when he starts writing to his son about his jealousy when Jack comes in. It seems to have, some, not a like sexual relation, but like a friendship with his own young wife, Lila.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do love that book, and I don't know if that, you know,
No, I mean that.
those are the things I pulled out of it. And I honestly, when I reread it, I thought, oh, those are all still there. But I guess I could see the other things that I maybe just skimmed over, or that
Mm,
my family didn't really like. So
yeah. No, I mean I don't really know that I could put my finger on, because everything you just said is exactly where I'm like, that sounds great. Like I want to go read it right now. But I don't, maybe it was his voice and maybe kind of the preacheriness of it,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, like you said, I do remember that it's not like it's written as if he actually does have the answers, or at least throughout the book, it comes across that that's not the case. So I don't
Yeah.
know if I went back to revisit. I mean, have you read? I know that there's other books in that
Yeah.
kind of series.
Yeah.
Have they all held up?
She's one that when it comes,
Yeah.
I beg and plead and bribe the publisher to send me it as soon as they have any kind of copy of it available.
Hmm.
And I really didn't care much for Home, the next one in the series, but I
Hmm.
loved Lila about his wife, and I
Okay.
loved Jack.
And that's the most recent
That's
one,
the
right?
most recent one about the boy who leaves and then has all these issues and then comes back. He's the one who marries the black girl.
Mm.
Um, so there's a lot that I think goes on now, but I'll tell you, like 1/3 of Jack takes place in a cemetery in just a conversation, and it could be very boring, but I guess I just like that Marilyn Robinson. I like seeing where she goes with those things,
Yeah.
and so I've kind of that works for me, but I
Hmm.
totally understand that it doesn't work for everybody.
Right. Well, again, though, on paper, though, that absolutely works for me. I have no problem with books that a lot of people consider
Hmm.
boring, and I mean, I could read an entire book that was one conversation if it was the right voice. And so,
Just don't like being preached to by an
yeah,
old
maybe
man.
that's it. Yeah, I don't know, but again, I do want to go back and reread that one, or maybe is it's Housekeeping? Is that right?
Housekeeping was her first one, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
So
thought that
just
was pretty good, but it to me the Gilead quartet, and I don't know if she's
yeah.
working on more in the
Hmm.
series, but that's where I really like it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, definitely not giving up. And I even own enough that I'm tempted to maybe just start over one of these days. So hearing you talk about it, maybe that'll be the spark I need. So,
So an interesting thing with this too though is and I think you've kind of portrayed a little bit of this. Isn't it interesting that with these books we feel like we should like, there might even be a little bit of anger
yeah.
directed at the author or people who pushed us into it. It's an interesting thing. I've had plenty of people who almost want to get into an argument with me if they don't like a book that I really like. And I'm like, hey,
Right.
you don't have to like it. Yeah, but this is why you shouldn't like it. And
Right.
then that's a little bit, too far. Some
Hmm.
people do that, but most of them are just like, look, I think in the desire to connect and figure it out, they're trying to establish their experience with the book,
Yeah.
and it
Legitimize it.
doesn't, and it doesn't, and I don't mean to dismiss it, but I'm also like, well, I really did like it, and I can't necessarily tell you all of the ways that it just worked for me.
Right.
But it's interesting how some of these feelings of hope can also be feelings of frustration and anger that we're we're not quite willing to say the emperor has no clothes and everyone's been hoodwinked. But I think there's a part of us that is would prefer to just really like these books, and
But
when
yeah,
we
that's what I was
don't,
gonna say. I think
it's
some of the anger
frustrating.
is focused on myself, like disappointment. Like, what do you're missing it? Come on. Like, there's something to this that you're not getting. And I think sometimes for me, that's where it's not anger, but I'm like, it's that disappointment of like, you feel like you're missing something that everybody else is getting. And there's got to be something there.
Yeah. But I'm trying really hard with these people to be like, look, I'll tell you the books I don't like that you like, and we can just have a conversation about it that doesn't involve a debate
Yeah.
necessarily, but
Right.
just a sharing of
Hmm.
experiences. I'm trying to calm down, and I feel like I'm doing a decent job with it,
Yeah.
but
So
we'll
you and
see.
your wife are speaking again after she read Gilead.
Yes, yeah, it's
Yeah.
been rough, but no, and she did feel bad, and I didn't want her to feel bad, and I didn't want her to
Right.
feel like she was incapable of connecting with the book because it is her own experience, right? It's not mine, and it isn't mine to direct, and she shouldn't feel that she's lacking in some way that I have, that I have some virtue that she does not.
Right. But
It's
it's one of the things that's
yeah.
so interesting and not like literature is so personal. And so somebody that you have so much in common with just and then you read a book and you feel differently about it. It can be kind of jarring because it's like we're on
Mhm.
the same page on almost everything or what. So
Yeah.
it's one of the fascinating things about literature and it's what makes it so powerful is just the connection that it makes with you on a one-to-one
Hmm.
basis.
And sometimes we can argue about books that, not argue, but like she does not like Jane Eyre because it's
Mm-hmm.
just Rochester is. it's ridiculous. She would never fall in love. She's too smart. And I'm like, I know, isn't it an amazing book? That's where it goes. That he is so repulsive and
Right.
awful. And it's at his most repulsive and humiliated that she marries him.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Right.
it's so twisted. I love it. And she's like, no,
Yeah.
it just doesn't make any sense to me. And those we have a lot of fun with. But there are some where
Hmm.
you know someone almost holds the book in reverence,
Yeah.
and you might feel a little bit like, what's wrong with me if I don't like it?
Right.
And
Exactly.
that can lead to defensiveness or frustration. And it just is what it is. It's
Hmm.
hard to figure all these things out. But
Right.
all right, let me go on to another one, that's in the same boat for that David Mitchell was for you, where and I guess a little bit for me, where you've loved some of these works, and so you're gonna keep reading the new books, especially when they don't write one every 4 or 5 years at most.
Mm.
Kazuo Ishiguro.
Mm.
Oh, Paul, I love The Remains of the Day. Love it. It's one of those books that I feel reverence to, that I feel has
Mm.
really impacted the way that I just am.
Mm-hmm.
And I love The Unconsoled, which was his next book after that. And I thought, We Were Orphans was really good. And then I did not really care for anything since.
Mm.
And it's made me wonder, why did I like those other ones? And it's made me even kind of think, well, maybe I don't really like We Were Orphans. Um, and his early books, when I read them, I'm like, well, this is The Remains of the Day, just in a different setting.
Yeah.
I was a little bit shocked when he won the Nobel Prize, but I keep on reading his stuff. And my reaction to it, especially with something like The Buried Giant, and I hated Clara, and the
Mm.
Sun. I hated that book. I read it twice because the first time I read it, I was like, no, no, people are loving this book. Like, it's across the board beloved, this book. And so it must be me. And so I
Mm-hmm.
read it again and just hated it. I thought, this is not even good writing. This is a
Mm.
concept that is done so well in other places. And I've just had to step back and say, I might just not be there for him, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even getting the little joy of his sentences. Like, I'm picking apart, like, you should read my review that I posted on my blog, because I'm like picking out his sentences and saying, this is a terribly written sentence, like, this
Mm.
is awful. And then I have to step back and say, I'm missing things. But every time he comes out with a new book, I'm ready to read it and
Yeah.
hopeful. Like, I was excited when Clara and the Sun came out. I was really excited when The Buried Giant came out, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it
Mm.
much at all. Never Let Me Go. I loved the atmosphere. Again, kind of thought, well, this is something that was written 50 years ago,
Right.
and has been done so many times since. And so there might even be a part of me that's like, look, you're writing things that I feel have been done, and I don't think you deserve the credit you get for the ingenuity.
Yeah.
But again, I could just be missing stuff.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I feel the same way about The Remains of the Day. That's on my all-time list. It's just stunning. And I've really enjoyed, like, An Artist of the Floating World. I really liked a lot. And some of his other ones that I've read. And I actually did like The Buried Giant quite a bit. Although when I first read it, I don't think that was my initial reaction. I think I was a little disappointed.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's one that's actually grown on me
Hmm.
since I read it.
It's
But
that thought, right? Like, I thought that the atmosphere was beautiful.
mm-hmm.
So I do feel, and that's why I read Clara and the Sun again. I feel like I'm the issue here.
Yeah, but I will say, as much as I like him, there's still a fair number of his books that I own and have not read from his backlist. And when Clara and the Sun came out and I heard what it was about, I have not even had any interest at all to pick it up, and have not done that. So I get where you're coming from. And I mean, somebody else who was popular around that same time, Ian McEwan, I've had a very similar
Mm-hmm.
experience with, where I loved Atonement and then read some of his backlist and liked some of them to varying levels. But then some of his later works, I've been less and less inclined to
Well, and
even pick up.
at the same time, basically, I think Ian McEwan's venture into AI
Yeah,
with Machines
exactly.
Like Me came out a year or so before Clara and the Sun. And so sometimes I'm thinking, did you guys just start reading sci-fi? You know,
I
and
know.
you're thrilled about this. At the same time, though, Ian McEwan has a verve with his writing that I do fall into.
Yeah.
Um, I do enjoy his books, even though I might also kind of hate parts of them. Like parts have
Right.
just rubbed me the wrong way, just because, man, he is he's a pyrotechnic with words,
Hmm.
which I know can really rub people the wrong way. But I listened to him read one of his short stories published in the New Yorker. What is it, My Purple Hearted Novel or something like that? And he reads it, and I thought, okay, you're just a goofy, because he reads it with this smugness. But that's an
Hmm.
act. I can tell it's not him trying to be
Right.
smug. And I'm like, okay, you know what you're doing. I'll
Yeah.
accept that I'm just having fun here too, and that you're not trying to say I'm Shakespeare,
Right. Right. Right.
which helps a
It
lot.
does. Well, but then like what you said, like Ishiguro is very much the opposite of that. He's very understated, and he has a lot of these tropes, or not. Trope might be a little dismissive, but he tends to go towards what's not said and memories and things that are
Hmm.
buried. And when it's done right, like in The Remains of the Day, it can create some of like these just beautiful moments and these
Hmm.
gorgeous characters and all this stuff. But it does open up that thing, like you said, as you read more of his works, like is he going to the same well too often,
Yep.
or like I feel like I already read this in a different setting. So yeah, that's
I
where it does get
yeah.
complicated.
I wrote that back at the time of Never Let Me Go. I kind of thought I can see I can see his work. I can see his thought
Hmm.
process. I can see moments. I can see his decisions. Like, I'm not going to talk about that for a while. I can see
Yeah.
his technique too strongly, and feel I can feel the strings that he's pulling. And I
Yeah.
felt that with The Buried Giant, and I felt that with Clara and the Sun. And again, that's so unfair and so presumptuous of me. He won the freaking Nobel Prize, and I'm telling him, look, I can see what you're doing. I could never do it. I could
Right.
never do it, and I get that, and I love that he provides that joy, and that people do love these books. Uh,
No, but it opens
so
up that interesting what you mentioned earlier. I can't remember who you were talking about. Oh, with Neil Gaiman, where that is one of the tricky things where once you get an idea into your head for an author, though, whether it's fair or not, you start looking
yep,
for
yep,
things, and maybe you never would have noticed it otherwise, or maybe it's not even there, or it's not there to the extent that you think it is. But once you get that in your head, it's pretty hard to shake. And so sometimes once you have these preconceived notions, that I don't know, I don't want to say that it dooms the author, but it does definitely sets up some obstacles in that relationship, I think.
yeah. We'll hit that again on my last one for the day, but
Yeah.
maybe before we go into that too much. Let's hear your last one,
Okay.
Paul.
So my last one is a little bit specific. So it's Zadie Smith, but her fiction, only her fiction. I absolutely love her nonfiction. I think Feel Free, for example, was one of my favorite collections of essays that I've read in the last 5 or 10 years. So I think her talent, especially for nonfiction, is just off the charts. And the thing that's tricky about it is I feel like her talent for fiction is also off the charts, but it's more for me, there's something about it that rubs me the wrong way. So I've read White Teeth, I've read The Autograph Man, and I've read Swing Time. And all three of those, it just didn't do it for me. But again, when I read On Beauty, which was one of her earlier ones, I really, really liked it. And so again, it's kind of that I've had a good relationship with her at one point. There's a sample from her past that I know when I connect, I can really enjoy her books because On Beauty I really did like. But White Teeth in particular, which was the one that kind of gave her her most notoriety and fame, I reread it recently and it just I don't know
Because
how
you
else to
couldn't
say
let
it.
it go. You couldn't let it
Yeah,
go.
but it irritates me. It's just I think it's I have a very short fuse when it comes to like quirky or kind of when the author is like nudge nudge, like wink wink, kind of see what I'm doing here, like isn't this character odd and enjoyable, or like that kind of thing. And I feel like when I part ways with her is where she goes off into kind of what probably some people love about her is where she goes off into these, you mentioned pyrotechnics. She'll go off and do these really quirky, funny, strange things right in the middle of the story, which again, that's not like, there's plenty of examples of authors doing that I absolutely love, but I don't know exactly what it is with her. But I think it's just kind of that, I don't know. It's like the knowing, like I said, the kind of the wink wink between you and the author that for me, it just doesn't work. So all that to say, it really bugs me though, because she is just so talented. And like I said, her nonfiction, her essays are some of the best that I've read. I mean, I love them. And so I will never stop reading her books because I know that she has everything that I love in an author. And I have a copy of NW that is actually autographed sitting on my shelf that I haven't read yet because I'm both intrigued and wary to pick it up because I'm like, I don't want those preconceived notions to ruin what otherwise might be, a good book. So I wish I could have like a palate cleanser or something to kind of like, erase my memories and just go into it with a fresh mind. But so anyway, yeah, very complicated relationship with Zadie Smith because I want to love her and I do love her in many respects, but there's just something about, like I said, going back to that same thing where I don't know if it's just in my head now where I start to pick up on some of these certain things that have irritated me in the past. And as soon as I see any sign of it, I'm just instantly get my defenses up or what the deal is. But
yeah, I do wonder how many of these things could, I'm not trying to equate this with like trauma, but maybe a way to talk about it is a little bit triggering, like, or neat, maybe the better word. So I don't want to, like I say, incorporate that kind of stuff too much into
right.
this conversation. That's not nearly as important.
Right.
Maybe knee jerk is a better way of putting it. Like something is done and it just spurs a certain kind of reaction in us. I can't tell you my thoughts on her fiction. I did read On Beauty and really liked it, but that was, I don't even know how long ago, and I have not read anything since, other than what shows up in the New Yorker, which I've enjoyed it, but it's never been something where I think I need to keep on reading her work. It is a blind spot that I sometimes feel, she's an important author, got an important perspective. I should read more. So I'm not trying to dismiss that. I just haven't done it. And that would be the reason why I want to go back and read her. It's not because of any other thing someone has said that's made me go, oh, that, I like that. And now you've made it even harder for me to think I should go and no.
Well, go read her essays then, and that would be a good entry point because, like I said, every time that I see she has some new nonfiction coming out, I instantly go, and I love all of it. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, we're being quite vulnerable here. Everyone thought. I wonder if Dorian's going to take away our Canadian citizenship
I know
honors.
He's not allowed because some of the books that he and I like. When he talks about Cormac McCarthy, for example,
he doesn't have the footing to he can give it to us, but he can't.
I know he has his own authors that are exactly like this that we've had some fun discussions about.
Well, my next one might be one that disappoints you. I'm feeling that sense of vulnerability here, Paul. Yeah. This might be the end.
Not gonna happen.
George Saunders.
Yes.
But I think a lot of it is what we've talked about with some of these other authors. I loved his work for many years, and then I started to feel like, okay, we've had this story told, or at least this way of telling me a story. For him, he's got so much style and verve and his unique way of writing that I love. But when I read another story that's in a different place and to kind of dealing with different things, and he's still using some of the same, short sentences of like almost computer programming talk for characters, I get it, but I don't, it doesn't do the same thing. And so I've built up this, I know what your game is. And again, he's someone that I love listening to. Today, he posted something on YouTube, a new conversation with George Saunders. I'm going to go and listen to it. I love the way he talks about his work, about fiction writing. He's got a generosity of spirit that I just find to be inspirational. I love that he is so successful and doing what he is doing. I wish I loved what he was doing more over the last, maybe decade or so.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of started with like the Simplica Girl Diaries, which
Yeah.
again, I love the concept, but still felt like I'm reading. Did you just some of your characters from other stories have now come to this world and are talking the same?
Right.
But I totally think it's me, because when I step back, I'm like, I like that. I think about that story quite often.
Yeah.
It's just that it's got this patina of my own issues, my own and presumptions. Again, it feels so arrogant to be like, well, I know what you're doing here, and that annoys me, George. It's so silly. But I've done Lincoln in the Bardo 3 times,
Okay. Because I was going to
because
ask you.
the concept, I was so excited. And that's when I got early, and we were on vacation or something in California, and when I came home, I had a bunch of packages. It was when I was doing the judging of the Best Translated Book Award, so there's a bunch of things to kind of go through, and that was one of the packages. Clear off the desk. It's 11 o'clock at night. I'm going to start reading this, and I didn't really like it.
Mm.
And then everybody started talking about it in terms that were so what I wanted to feel, not just,
Yeah.
oh, I really liked that, but, they were, again, that kind of reverence almost. Like, you could tell they had a really special experience with the book. So then I listened to the audiobook with all those actors,
Yeah.
and different voices doing it. And that really wasn't for me. Like,
Okay.
they didn't say things the way that I was saying them in my mind. I don't know. It didn't work for me as much as
Right.
I like, what is his name? The guy from Parks and Rec, Offerman,
Oh,
Nick,
yeah.
Nick
Nick
Offerman.
Offerman.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I love listening to him too. I did not think he was a very good reader of some of those lines.
Right.
And so that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. That was attempt number 2. And I thought, okay, attempt number 1 was me maybe not knowing the flavor and having a reaction that I just didn't get what I wanted. I didn't get the things that I was hoping for when you think of Lincoln and that sadness.
Yep.
Attempt 2 was the audiobook, which I didn't like the style.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, I'm going to read it again. Me, just me in the book. And
Mm-hmm.
now I know what to expect. And man, it just didn't work again for me. And I'm so disappointed, because I want it to. I
Yeah.
really genuinely do. I'm tempted to try it again. And it's not just because of this episode. I've been looking at it and thinking, I want to, this to me is this episode, perfectly encapsulated.
Yeah.
I can't let him go. And I can't let that book go in particular. So what is it? Now, I think I've been working through some of my issues, because he's published some more stories in the New Yorker, and I think they could have the same criticism, the same thoughts. And I
Mm-hmm.
have really liked him. I think I've sat down and tried to, you said palate cleanser. It's a good way of putting it. I think I've sat down and said, no, push this out, get into a Zen
Mm-hmm.
state and just enjoy what you love about this. He's
Yeah.
still doing great work. Enjoy the things you love. Stop looking at the things that are, you've built up these things in your mind, and you're attaching them to a story that doesn't deserve it. Just pretend you've never done any of this before. And it has worked. I've really enjoyed the last handful of stories in the New Yorker.
Yeah.
In fact, I've
Yeah.
got one I need to send over to you.
Oh, nice.
So I think I might be working through some of these issues with him, but I
Mm-hmm.
still don't feel confident to go back to Lincoln in the Bardo just
Yeah.
yet, because I feel like that could someday be a favorite book of mine. And it's
Yeah.
very weird that after 3, it's still a book I don't like. And there's a lot of faith and hope, I guess, that goes into saying, once you're on attempt number 7,
Right.
it will then become your favorite book. Is it
But
worth it? I
that's what
think
I
it
meant
is in
earlier. I
a
mean,
way.
yeah, no, I think that's fascinating. That's kind of what is so fascinating about this is there's those books like that. Like you said, it's not for lack of trying, but you're not
Yeah.
ready to give up on it. And not only that, but you still think it could be a favorite book. I mean, to me, that's the tension that makes this so interesting. When you talked about the sadness of Lincoln that you were hoping for, have you ever made it far enough in that book where it gets into his head when he's
Oh,
talking about?
I've read it the 3 times.
Okay.
Those were not attempts.
Oh.
Yeah, those are 3. I
Wow.
read it each time.
Interesting.
Um, And those are powerful passages.
Oh man, I mean those
It's all the
passages.
distractions, I think,
Yeah.
that I
No,
that I'm wondering, why are you doing this? Why?
like
And maybe that's part of my frustration with myself, is I can't quite figure out the why of how he did that whole entire book.
yeah.
I don't quite get it, but like you, I love that kind of crap in other books. Throw in
Right.
all these weird things. This Laszlo Krasnorke starts on section 2, and it's all these trains, and I don't know. I love it when authors throw in stuff that doesn't quite make sense, or play with
Yeah.
what is real and isn't. Like, yeah, I know some of these things are things he got from true newspaper accounts,
Mm-hmm.
or actual things he's citing, other things he's made up. I
Right.
love that kind of stuff. I love
Right.
it. I don't get it in this one,
Mm-hmm.
though. To me, the heart of the book should be the Lincoln stuff,
Yeah.
and that's what I want. And so the other stuff, I feels like it pulls away from it when I want it to add to it, and I just haven't made that calculation yet, or something. I don't
Oh,
know.
well, it's interesting. I mean, it's funny because as you talk about that, I recognize all the frustrations that you're pointing out. I think they're valid for sure, and I recognize them. But for whatever reason,
Mhm.
with him, it doesn't bug me. Where with like Zadie Smith, for example, it does, and that's what I mean about it. It's so weird how personal it is
Yeah,
because some of the very same things, like
books are
the quirkiness.
idiosyncratic, but
Oh
so are
yeah,
we.
exactly. Yeah, because the quirkiness in some of those things that I consider like my pet peeves, he could be accused of all of that in spades. And for whatever reason, for him, I'm just like, I love it. I'm all in. But
Yeah.
for somebody else, it just drives me nuts. So it's interesting. But
It's like my kids. The older one says something. Don't you ever do that again? The younger one says the same thing. Oh, that's so cute.
right, exactly. For sure. Yeah, no, I don't know. Like you said, it's I don't know. That's the kind of the interesting ongoing discussions that we keep having. And maybe in a few years when we're talking about some of these books, all of a sudden we'll have that breakthrough moment where it finally happened. I did
Well,
it.
yeah. Well, and he has what's his new one coming out in the fall? Here's the thing that it is, again, fascinating, why George Saunders really kind of is probably my go-to author for an episode like this. He has a collection of short stories coming out in the fall called Liberation Day. Let's see, it comes out on October 18th. Um, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
Probably I've read most of the stories in the New Yorker, but I'm hoping there are a few that I haven't. But I put this in my pre-order list.
Mm,
If they may send me a copy, I don't know, but I haven't asked, and I'm like, yeah, I want to buy this. I want to support you that way, and kind of get it the way everybody else does. It comes on that day, and that's exciting for me that he has it. Um, but again, why?
right.
Why is it that way? But it is.
Yeah. Well, we talked about his A Swim in the Pond in the Rain,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't believe you've read. I mean, that might be
No, I
an
did
interesting,
download it, but I haven't
yeah,
read it yet.
that might be an interesting kind of appetizer, or because I know the complaints that people have had about him is that he tends to do the same things. And I would argue, there's still some of the stuff in Lincoln in the Bardo, but it is a significant departure from
Yeah.
his short stories. And then for him to do A Swim in the Pond in the Rain, like, I'm not saying he did it as a reaction to that criticism, because I don't think an author like him works that way. But I will say, I would argue that people who said he always does the same thing, his last two books that have come out have been significant departures from what he was
Mm-hmm.
previously known for. So, I don't know. But
Yeah.
again, all that said,
No,
I still
that's
totally
very
get.
fair.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. He's a fascinating guy. So I'll be curious to see where he continues to go.
He really is. And again, that's probably one of the reasons why I want to get it, is that I love his work in general. I love
Yeah.
who he is and how he gets out there, and he's not just sitting somewhere writing. He's
No.
involved in the conversation about it. So,
When talk about authenticity, he's seemingly about the most authentic person I could ever come across. Because every time I see him, I even saw him in person, met him briefly. Everything that you would think he was the way he came across. Like he just, yeah, he seems like a very nice, kind person who, like you said, his outlook on life is something that I really admire. So if nothing else, there's that. But I also think his works are, you know, something to keep returning to as well.
Well, and I have all of them, and I've gone through. I actually think I've read all of his everything. All of his publications. I'm sure there's a thing here or there that he may publish somewhere that hadn't ever been collected that I haven't read.
Right.
And I'm often thinking, oh, I'll go back and try some of the ones I didn't like as much before.
Yeah.
Again, especially these days where I feel like I'm getting to a little bit of a turning point.
Yeah.
But
well, and I think I'm repeating myself, but if you haven't tried his audiobooks with him reading, that's something that I absolutely love. Like pick up 10th of December and the audiobook and listen to him read it. I mean, his style of reading is wonderful.
I would agree with you, because a lot of times he does the New Yorker, like when he has a thing published in the New Yorker, he will do the reading for it, and it is a lot of fun. We'll have to maybe talk about that sometime. Again, same thing with Ian McEwan's story. I don't know how I would have felt about that had I just read it on my own, but having someone who knows how to read really well and knows the story, boy, that was so fun. And I think that George Saunders is in the same boat. I put Tessa Hadley in there too. I love reading her, or having her read her stories to me.
Yeah. Like you said, that might be a future episode, actually.
Yeah. So I shouldn't say any more. Plus, we've been going on. I actually thought today might be one of our 40-minute episodes, but
I know. What are we going to talk about? Oh, it's been 2 hours.
Oh, but that was a lot of fun and interesting conversations. Listeners, we're still the happy people that we've always been. Love reading. We just sometimes have feelings too,
That's right. We've been hurt before.
Feels very vulnerable almost to talk this way, because I love books and I love authors and I love what they do. And so I don't ever really like to come down and again, it feels so presumptuous. So hopefully most of what we've said today has come across as, as Paul said, personal idiosyncrasies and personal connection with things, and not necessarily like that's worthless, or if you like them, we just aren't friends.
Right.
That's just not who we are at all. It's not even just a way I don't want to be. I don't, that I don't care, other than I want you to enjoy things you read and love reading, I love that kind of stuff. And if that's what's happening, then perfect. All the wheres and whys and how and when it doesn't connect is fun to talk about, but it certainly shouldn't be the point of disconnect between anybody. So hopefully we're still friends, everybody.
Absolutely. Well, and in that spirit, if anybody wanted to share, any authors that they haven't connected with, I do think it's a very fascinating conversation. And hopefully everybody knows by now that Trevor and I, it's a safe space. So it's not like we would be asking for any kind of criticism or anything, but I just am fascinated by the different conversations that arise out of these. Like I said, I've had a lot of fun ones with Dorian and other people online about, those types of things. So if anybody wanted to send in, some discussions about that, I would love to chat about it.
Yeah. Share some of your authors that you feel the same way about, or tell us with the authors we talked about, your own thoughts and why you might, especially why you might love them. We do want to hear that, and we're not going to write back and say, well, that's just silly. We really won't. So, all right, Paul. Well, thanks so much for your time this morning. Looking forward to doing it again here in a couple of weeks when we announce the winner of our Mark Haber giveaway.
Yeah, be sure to get in on that, everybody.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Paul.
All right. See you. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mookse and the Gripes podcast. You can follow the Mookse and the Gripes and get show notes and book and film reviews at mookseandgripes.com. On Twitter, you can find Trevor at Mookse and Paul at BiblioPaul. You can also get information about future shows on our Patreon. If you'd like to donate to the show, anything and everything, even $1 a month, helps and is deeply appreciated. You can become a patron at patreon.com/Mookse. Until next time.